Hey guys, it's Mario from WATL, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with the 2020 World Champion, Ryan Smit. Ryan is arguably one of the most dominant axe throwers in history.
Ready to go down in history?
I don't think anyone has performed with the stats that Ryan has performed ever. For those who don't personally know Ryan like I do, Ryan, in my opinion, is one of the smartest people I have ever met. I see how he processes information. I see how he comes up with creative solutions. He is nothing shy of being a genius. And it makes sense why someone as intelligent as Ryan was able to create a throw that no one else globally in the world has, that he created himself for him, that works extremely well. Right off the bat, Ryan immediately starts talking about recording his throws, commentary. He's taking things to the absolute next level of analyzing his throw and going in slow motion and looking at any sort of imperfections that might exist in his throw.
I could probably talk about it for 3 hours straight.
I've been working on this thing for 36 hours straight.
When I'm throwing with myself, when I'm recording myself to watch it back, etc., then I do like a constant commentary. Yeah. And I've noticed that when I'm doing experimentation mode, like I'll change every single throw to throw. I'll change something. And when I find something that I think might be cool, I'll literally stick with it for a whole lot of throws and analyze it, write it down. Yeah. Or I'll think of something else and I'm like, can't try that now. I'll write it down for a next session. Like I have a very structured approach to it.
Ryan likes to keep everything natural.
Just keep him walking, act natural.
He likes to keep everything as repeatable as possible, but part of what he likes to do is he likes to engage the toes. That helps him with his balance, so he is perfectly balanced before he throws his axe. Now, Ryan's gonna talk in depth about his setup and how he sets up his throw. So I'm not gonna summarize anything because it's best that you hear from the champ himself.
Just pretend you're the target, right? Usually you start either walking up for the first time or walking back from the target. You can make everything the same simply by when you walk up to the target, walk in front of the line, turn, and come back as if you're coming back from the target. This is actually pretty important to your whole setup. When you go to shoot a gun for the first time, let's say a 9mm, right? After your first shot, it's double action. You have to pull it a little harder. And after that, then it's already cocked. So you only have to pull like a little bit less, but it changes the first shot. So you can actually make it all the same by pre-cocking that hammer back. And then the hammer is cocked back for your whole entire magazine. So kind of along that concept, there's no reason to change 1 in 10 of your throws, which is 10% of your throws, by walking out to the line to start for the first time, unless you're feeling really comfortable. The best thing to do is check the target, for instance, do what you gotta do to walk back to the line and turn around exactly like every other throw. And it also just gives you in this rhythm. That's the first thing. My lineup is right on the line, so the line's right here. That's not necessarily how I got to that point, to putting both feet on the line. A, yes, it's the closest to the target, which gives you a bigger target, literally.
You took my advice about theatricality a bit, literally.
But B, it's the most natural. Everything about your throw is, the biggest thing is that make as much natural as possible. If your feet naturally fall like this, let them be like that. If you're taller or shorter and your feet fall a little bit closer together, have them like that every single time. The reason is because it's very easy to consistently do something that's natural than to consistently do something that's unnatural. If you're finding like a bad balance, you might want to keep your feet farther apart. I like to keep them about shoulder width apart. It keeps you from wobbling almost at all. And then just engage your toes. So a big part of it is A, keep your feet natural, keep them the same. And B, no matter what throw you have, engaging your toes engages your balance. When you're walking on ice, one of the biggest, I know you know this probably from Canada, the biggest way to keep your balance when walking on slick ice and not fall is by engaging your toes. It keeps your balance forward and it keeps you from slipping side to side. Same thing here. So when you're moving around, your toes give you an incredible amount of balance. And when you see people that have lost a toe, or depending on what toe it is, it completely can affect their balance when running or standing, etc. They get more or less disability if they lose a toe, depending on what toe it is and how it affects their balance. But if you're just standing here and you're not engaging your toes at all because you don't need to, then once you start moving around, using the ball of your foot and your heel to try to control that balance, where you really could have an incredibly stable platform just by engaging your toes slightly. It's actually a really hard thing to remember, especially when you get into a rhythm or you're in a tournament. It's really hard to remember to engage your toes. It's not a natural thing, but that's one of those things that does help you. So you want to engage just at least slightly. The way I remember it for my own self is I lean forward a little more than I need to. So just lean forward a little naturally and your toes will naturally engage.
Don't engage. We almost got this off!
So that's how I get it for mine. Oh, as far as waist goes, you said waist and below. So one of the things I've told a lot of people about this is hip twist makes more of a difference than you think. You could throw a throw that feels perfect. It feels like, oh yeah, this is gonna hit, and then it hits over to the left. You're like, what happened? It makes no sense. And you gotta realize that you might have introduced another axis to your throw, left and right, because your hip was twisted slightly to the right when you threw, and naturally it'll just release itself as you throw because you're not controlling it. So A, you could either engage your abs the whole time, which I used to do, but it's a little harder and it's hard to control. But B, and this is what I developed into, is before you throw, relax, shake a little bit. That's my little wiggle that I do sometimes. Relax, feel it settle down, and lock it in. Then when you throw, your hip has nothing to do with it. You have no other axis. At that point, that's the point at which you don't want to hit the kill anymore. You want to hit the middle of the kill when you get really into that, like after a few hundred throws.
Ryan talks about taking all elements of the throw, including the engaging of the fingers that will bring any sort of variable or any variation into the throw. All he wants to do is have a motion where literally all you have to do is throw.
So everything happens in a kind of a cascading motion, I guess. So disregard how I'm doing it. I'm just showing you. First of all, I align myself not to the shoulder of the target and not to my head to the target, but you have this triangle, right? Picture, this is exaggerated, but picture this triangle, and this side is your shoulder, this side is your eye, okay? So your frame of reference here, and here's your shoulder and all the other stuff in between, right? The axe is flying from next to my head. So that's one side of my triangle. My point of view is here, that's the other side of the triangle. I wanna line up forward to back, the center of the triangle. So the 2 points are always gonna meet. Otherwise, I'm trying to offset too much the axe to the board. We're talking about a matter of like half an inch here, but I try to make everything happen as naturally as possible. So I give my brain like a break, make it easy for it. Like, hey, just center it between the two things and boom. That way I can move my eye pretty much directly towards the target and using the right eye as a frame of reference. And then it just naturally goes. If I try to line up with my shoulder, I'm actually throwing a little bit to the right and I'm having my unconscious brain account for an offset. Now everyone would like to think, and some throws actually come straight back over the shoulder. When that happens, they'll like account for like, hey, I need to line that up with the target because, you know, it's lined up with my shoulder. I tried that for a long time and I found out it doesn't take into account your point of reference and that you have to figure an offset every time. You have to calculate, your brain has to calculate an offset every time to figure out where it comes from. Whereas if you split the two, and you don't have to calculate an offset anymore, it naturally happens. So let's picture, I'm gonna try to make the camera the thing, I can't really do it very well. So when I come up, I used to come up to about here, lining up a portion of the axe to where my target is, but now I do the entire arm. So I look along the entire arm, make sure that it's lined up, and I come back along the exact axis, just like that. If you were farther away, you'd see more like straight, but you're a little bit closer. Getting into the hand portion, remember I talked about natural? Natural is Shane Shep's ping pong ball throw for his beer pong, right? Where your thumb is behind it, very natural. So if you're going to, the next time you throw a ball of trash into the trash can, instead of throwing it like this, like normal, put your thumb behind it, drop your arm like this, and do this, and you're gonna find it going in there every single time. You can't really do that with an axe because it kind of restricts your wrist enough that you can't get a lot of flick power out of it, but you don't really need to, because if you rest the axe on the hand right there, when it comes back, this becomes natural. Right now, none of my fingers are engaged at all. So when I do it, I'm trying to spit out too much, not in a very structured manner, but when I'm setting up and I do this, and then I bring it up here, I'm checking that the axe is aligned with my arm entirely. 0, none of my fingers are engaged on my normal axe. And then when I come up and over like this, I'm moving my entire arm and frame with none of my fingers engaged at all. Make sure everything's straight, then I come down. None of my fingers are still engaged. I bring it up. I'm carrying the entire weight of the axe to my left hand and up and back. None of my fingers are engaged. My pinky might be slightly rigid. And then when I go to throw, it releases itself. So I'm basically abusing the fact that your fingers naturally curl to hold the axe.
What I've never heard any other thrower mention before, and Ryan is the only person that has mentioned this, is every single throw.
Every single time a problem arises,
Not every other one, not every other day, not every other week. Every single throw he takes, he practices and mirrors a high pressure scenario in his head. So when he's walking back from his practice, he's on TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to witness the greatest happening in sport.
He's on ESPN. It's that final shot of Game 3 in the finals to determine the world champion. And he runs that scenario over and over again. And before the world championship, right after he won the world championship, he mentioned that he was not nervous at all because he had practiced the scenario so many times, and that's what he was talking about. It's practicing with a purpose, practicing with pressure, and mimicking what would actually happen in, say, a world championship scenario.
I didn't do this so much at the beginning, and I don't do it really during experimentation phases. Like, I completely separate my practice between experimentation and practice to see my performance, basically. In those cases, which I'm basically going to go towards those cases, I always picture a scenario in my head. I'm walking back from the 9th throw. I'm 1 point ahead. Have to hit this kill because the other guy's going to hit it too. Just have to. Every single time. Like, if I hit this, I win. If I miss this, I lose. Every single throw, no matter what. I won't walk back unless there's something I'm trying to analyze. I will not walk back without a scenario in my head. This helps dramatically when the real thing happens. It's just like another day. It's really not convincing yourself that it's just another day. It's really you and your subconscious mind, where your subconscious mind sees this situation and is now used to it. And so your subconscious mind does not trigger fight or flight, which is the nerves, which is the shaking, which is the heavy breathing and adrenaline. So when you hit fight or flight, that's when the adrenaline gets released and you're a little bit screwed.
We're screwed.
We're screwed.
We're screwed.
unless you're really good at working under that kind of pressure, which it almost always is not the case.
Now, one of the truest things I think I've ever heard anyone say is that the World Championship, it doesn't start in December. It actually starts today. It starts now. That's when all the practice begins. And every single throw you take leading up to the World Championships counts.
During your tournament starts, like your world champion starts now. Just picturing the scenarios. It doesn't start on December 9th. No, it starts now. You're picturing those scenarios, working up to it. All those tens of thousands of throws culminate in just a few. And you're more likely to throw them just like those 10,000 throws by throwing them right now. How to calm yourself down is, I have my own like personal secret ways of doing it, but along the lines of how you view the situation, how you control your emotions, and it's basically suspension of disbelief. The way I do it might not work for everybody, but it is suspension of disbelief. When you're watching a TV show, you become engaged in that show. Sometimes you forget that it's a show or a movie, and you think your mind actually thinks it's real. You feel the emotions because you think it's real. So the way you view a tournament or a pressure situation entirely dictates your body mode, how calm you are. And you want to be as calm as possible, 100%. You want to have zero nerves, zero. They say that you perform better under pressure.
Seems pretty cool to me for a man under pressure like that.
And maybe that's true if you're a runner or if it's a high, exciting sport or anything like this, but this is an accuracy sport. Just like darts, there's no huge calculations. There is performing your one action exactly as you plan to perform it. So the tension actually does not really help you. The only thing it might help with is focus for some people, but for me, that does not help me.
You'll notice on ESPN, Ryan has his routine where he flicks the wood off the axe, flips it over, swipes the axe, and then he picks anything that is off it. That routine he developed not only to keep his mind into the sport, not to think about anything else other than his throw during the match, but it is actually done with a purpose. He doesn't want the slightest piece of wood. So when he brings it back, there's nothing that distracts him, or there's no piece of wood that's there that will make him miss the throw. Because again, all it takes is one throw, and it will cost you the game, or it could potentially cost you the match.
I like removal of variables, remember? So I'll take the axe out of the board, always with the left hand, you know, to keep my right arm only for throwing. So I'll take it out and I'll turn around and I'll always be holding it like this so that I can flip it over this way. So when I bring it up, before I do, I check this side for wood, flip it, grab it, and I do that. I don't flip it all the way around, I just flip it. So any piece of wood or anything like that's gone. And also you see me wipe it off as well, right? Because when it comes up, it comes right on my head. If there's any piece of anything there, even a sticky piece of sap sometimes, which is very rare, then I'll feel it on my head, it'll distract me and I could miss. It's that tiny. I don't want anything to even possibly give me a chance of missing one time, because that's basically how you get knocked out right there, just one throw. Everything I do is kind of for a purpose. It's not just for like, hey, I look cool because I'm flipping the axe. Another part of the routine that I adopted from a long time ago, where I used to like turn, look at the board and just throw like by instinct. And it kind of worked, kind of didn't, you know, it wasn't a very good throw. What I discovered from that is if you lock in your eyes first and then maintain your head orientation, move your body around your head like a chicken head, that's how you lock your focus in. So you'll see me almost every single time. I'll turn with my head first, look at the target, and turn my entire frame around my head, and my head stays locked in. No matter what I do, my head stays locked in. Just basically, it's, even if you're not positioned perfectly with your feet, it gives your unconscious mind basically a frame of reference, like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going for. No matter what, anything else happens, we want this axe to go there. The walking slow part of my routine, you already know why I do that. Some people have said when I drop my hand down, like here, I'm feeling my heart, and I can feel my heart, but really this is just the most natural place for it to come down to. So I don't have to think about it. It just comes down there, I'll leave it. Comes down there, I'll leave it. Some people put their hands in their pockets because they can't figure it. It feels awkward, you know, like an anchor man. What do I do with my hands, you know?
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
But putting your other hand somewhere makes a big difference, because how this sways changes your entire axis, just another weight over here, and it can actually change your throw.
In web development and in online like websites in general, this goes for billion-dollar companies and even small companies, there's something called A/B testing, where you're testing things out to see what works. Does a green button get you more clicks than the red? Does the text being in big capital letters that says on sale now work better than the hottest new item of 2021? That's what A/B testing is. And Ryan and I had this discussion about how he actually applied that methodology to his throw.
I would say the experimentation is huge. It's massive, because I have a box full of experimental handles and axes over there. I change things all the time, because you don't lose your core throw. I write down my throw and I have videos of it, and I'm never gonna lose it.
Just don't lose it.
If I change my throw drastically to like a side throw or anything like that, I won't lose my old throw. So I think, and this is very important, if no one else looking at this remembers anything else, the biggest thing stopping you from excelling or becoming better is being unwilling to change, basically. And being unwilling to change drastically, because you're going to change, and what's going to happen is you probably will do worse once you change, even though you know it's probably a better change because it's got all this precedence and stuff like that. But no, you've got your own way of doing things, and bless your heart, that's great if you want to stick it in the board. But if you want to get to the top, you have to change, even as far as abandoning your old throw entirely, because you don't lose it. You can always go back to it later on, if after a month or two, you know, it doesn't work out. Now, this is the best time to do that, because really everyone's working towards the world championship. That's it. So the entire year, 3/4 of the year, you can change, try different throws for even a month or two at a time, change. But within 2 months of that world championship or so, you don't want to change anything. You don't want to change your axe. You don't want to change the weight of your axe. You don't want to change your handle. You don't want to change the way you practice. And if you experiment or do anything differently, be very careful not to have it be a big change. And then you want to do things the same way from then on. But if after that you just accept, hey, this is the best throw, or this is the greatest throw, I did really good at the world championship, you just accept that all year, then someone's going to come up and beat you that has been changing, have been developing, been figuring things out, and they're going to just beat you. So you have to keep changing. You have to change a lot.
Ryan talks about how timing of practice matters. And he also talks about how many throws he actually did leading up to the World Championship. Once you realize that Ryan put in so much time and effort, it should be no surprise of why he was 2020's world champion and why he was also in the finals of the 2021 US Open.
So I remember having, I think with Michael Theodora, that's funny you mentioned him, during the Quaddle days, I think we had a 4-hour like practice session / talking about axe throwing session. And we were talking about all kinds of like different things that we're trying out, what works for us, what doesn't. I was giving him some tips and he was trying to give me some of like stuff he does differently. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Whoa, that's so cool, bro.
I would say the timing of practice, it matters. It matters a lot. You wouldn't study for a test that you're going to have in a year today. You're not going to remember it quite as well, but you can read it, you know, but you're not going to study it to the extent that you would the day before, for instance, right? Like you said before, I said over 1 million throws, easily over 1 million, like conservatively, I did before the championship. But that was like in the year leading up to it. It wasn't like in 2 weeks.
Ryan mentions, don't get bored by being better. Leading up to the Worlds, it wasn't uncommon for him to practice 6 hours a day.
Leading up to a big championship, probably 6 hours plus a day, maybe average of 4 to 5, but 6 hours plus a day wouldn't be unusual. It's really hard because people say like it gets boring after a while of throwing, right? The way you keep it from being boring is by doing better, by seeing yourself even incrementally getting better. So when you hit 10 kill shots in a row, you're like, okay, that's great. And then 20 minutes later, you get 12 kill shots in a row. That's monumentally motivating. It's huge. Unrealistically, in a real tournament, are you going to do 4 hours straight and then hit 20 kill shots in a row? But if after 4 hours you do get 20 kill shots in a row, you don't want to stop. You want to keep going. And what's going to stop you is your back being tired or you getting hungry or something like that. And that's it. My record is actually, I think I've gone above 25, but I wasn't counting. But my record is 25 alternating and I got it on video.
So Ryan has recently moved to Hawaii, and because of his move, he's unable to travel as much as he would like to for all the major tournaments. And that's why you've probably not seen much of him or seen him on any of these major tournaments that are happening in the mainland of US. Now, Ryan doesn't have as much time to practice as he used to, but he has actually developed a practice routine to get him back into tip-top shape of where he was last year leading up to the Worlds or even leading up to the US Open Championship.
I can't practice nearly as often as I would like to. My average score is probably around 60 in practice, which isn't very good. Actually, if you think about it, I have written down my practice routines or leading up practices and leading up warm-ups to tournaments. So I don't really worry too much about not being able to practice too much because I know if, hey, I got a tournament in a month, I will change my practice routine. I'll do it all with a purpose and I'll get up to where I need to be. I don't know who this might help, but my goal isn't really to get a better average than anyone else. My goal is to throw perfectly. My goal is to never miss a single shot. Like it's the highest goal, which you can't really achieve, I don't believe, like in a human
a machine, like a robot
way. But if your goal is not to beat anyone else and not to have a higher average than anyone else, then you're gonna do the best you can possibly do, regardless of what anyone else is doing.
Now, his number one tip is to keep practicing. Keep practicing and experimenting with small little things and always make these tweaks.
Continue to practice and continue to change and experiment small things during practice. The reason for this is you get frustrated with that 58. I know some people out there that have about that average score and they just get frustrated. They cannot break that ceiling. Sometimes it's just one tiny, minuscule aspect of your throw that is causing that ceiling, where that aspect of your throw is only going to get so accurate and that's all you can do. But through experimentation, think of things like during your day, driving to work, something comes to your head, write it down. Like, hey, I need to try this. Hey, my elbow's a little too far out. Let me change and try this on this next throw. Hey, my posture sucks. Let me get my posture up. And suddenly, like within a single night, you might be just blasting through your averages. That happens, and that happens to me. That had happened to me a lot of times. So if you feel that glass ceiling, just know that you might be a 5-minute practice session trying something new that you hadn't before, from completely obliterating that average and completely just shooting yourself up. The book you can find, of course, is the Perfect Throw, and that's on Amazon. You can find that on Amazon pretty easily. I've got way more tips and stuff in there than I could possibly remember to bring up right now, and I front load them right to the first chapter too.
Ryan brings up a good point. He definitely recommends a wrist wrap.
Okay, now the first thing you want to do, step 1, get wrist control.
And he talked before about how often and how many wrist wraps he actually tried until he found the perfect one. Now, this goes to show you the level of in-depth training and experimentation that Ryan has put into the sport to perfect his throw.
So the wrist strap, this is a copper compression wrist strap. Believe it or not, I went through about 12 different ones till I found this exact one that I liked. I could feel over just a ton of throws, I could feel my wrist becoming sore. And I'm kind of getting older here. I'm 37 and a half. So I don't want to end up being an old guy that can't move his wrists. So I started putting this on. And when I was looking for a wrist strap, I was actually looking at bowlers, because bowlers use them all the time, of course, because they carry a heavy ball and stuff. And reading about it, then you could read that, hey, it gives you a little bit more stability, consistency in the way your wrist moves, because it limits it. So it's less floppiness, right? So I have to, you can see marks on it. I don't know if you can see. I tighten it to exactly the same level each time, because if you do it tighter, less mobility, looser, more mobility. And I've experimented with that as well. So when my axe comes back, it rests basically all the way back. So again, into the natural thing. I don't bring it back to a certain level. I bring it back until it stops, until my wrist physically stops it. That way it's exactly the same way every time. And that is exactly what gives me the rotation of hitting the board exactly flat every single time. It's that right there. If you I call it floating my wrist. When you bring your axe back, when it comes back, it rests on the back side of my wrist. If you float it, if you hold it up, which I accidentally do sometimes, it completely changes the rotation. It completely changes how much rotation power you put into it, and it will screw it up. And I'll notice immediately as soon as I do it, I can't believe I did that. The wrist will A, keep you from damaging your wrist over time, or carpal tunnel, anything like that. And B, it will add a little bit of consistency, but it doesn't really affect your accuracy. It's just the rotation mostly. But I absolutely recommend it. 100,000% recommend it.
And ultimately, the big final thing is put in the time. Put in the time and see what works for you, and that's what's gonna lead to success.
So I guess the one thing is, like, don't be frustrated with yourself. Yeah. You will get better. And if you take tips from people that you know can throw well, you will get better. And you won't get bored with this sport if you start winning even half the time. You will not be bored with the sport. So just keep going for it, and you will end up in a place that you want to be. You have to put in the time, but you can do that. You can do it.
Again, thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. We'll be producing a lot more great content. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. If you have any questions, comments, or anything, add them below.
And now no reason for both of them not to go out for it with a 10-point lead.
Ryan, you are going to 55 points. Both players are coming. That's a summary of the day.
Kump. Smit connects as he found a way to do so much today. And Evan, Ryan Smit is a 2020 World Axe Champion. Surgical precision, incredible.